Quintero, Chini Defensor.
Good afternoon, everyone. There have been a lot of discussions today with respect to energy storage. And indeed, energy storage is the next step for renewable energy. And there are great strides already that has occurred, especially in terms of the development of more cost-effective energy storage solutions. For our panel on energy storage, trends and opportunities in the Philippines, we are fortunate to have with us today panelists that will share with us their perspectives from both a developer and distribution utility standpoints. From Manila Electric Company, or MERALCO, the Philippines' largest DU, distribution utility, allow me to introduce Chini Defensor, who is MERALCO's Business Development Director. To share his views from a developer standpoint, let's welcome Mr. Hansel CUBANGBANG, CITICORE Renewable Energy Corp. Senior Business Development Manager. He was part of the team that revised the Philippine Grid Code. Likewise, our next panelist represents the developer side. He's the project developer for BayWa RE, Engineer Alvin Prado. Okay. For the first question, I'd like to address this to Hansel. For the benefit of members of the audience who may not be too familiar with energy storage solutions, could you give a short, brief introduction on energy storage and its uses, especially from the point of view of a developer?
Thank you, Dennis. Good afternoon, everyone. So I think in simple terms or in general terms, I could describe energy storage as a facility that could inject and absorb energy to or from the grid. It can be a pump hydro, it can be a battery energy storage solution, it can be a capacitor, like it can be a compressed air energy storage system, and many more. And in terms of application, we've seen the first kinds, ancillary services. So in my previous capacity, I was able to install more than 500 megawatt of energy storage, battery energy storage system, all for ancillary services, right? There are other applications like capacity firming particularly for solar. And in CITICORE, we are working on that right now. And other applications such as grid utility support, supporting the grid to maintain a certain level of stability, and many more.
Thank you, Hansel. So for Chini, who is connected with MERALCO, from a distribution utility perspective, what would be the uses of energy storage?
Thank you, Attorney Dennis. It's a pleasure to be here this afternoon. I think from the distribution utility perspective, we also have to keep in mind all of the discussions that occurred this afternoon where we're seeing that the trend in behind the meter and distributed energy resources is that there's a greater and greater take-up. We've seen the increase in rooftop solar, and I think that this is a trend that will just continue to accelerate. And it will certainly also help in the achievement of our goals at the national level. But on the other side, from the distribution utility perspective, this would also introduce some risks in terms of the intermittency and the variability from RE sources, which was also mentioned by several of the panelists earlier today. And so from the perspective of needing to protect the assets that we currently have in our substations and transformers, we need to be able to supplement the variability and intermittency of solar through strategically located energy storage systems that help us to stabilize and even to defer some investments in the assets through peak shaving.
Thank you, Chini. So while we're on that subject, can we also ask you to describe the different kinds of battery technologies and applications, as well as the application status and potential of these technologies in the Philippine context?
So I think, and this was also touched upon by Hansel earlier, there really are a wide variety of different technologies in terms of energy storage systems. The most familiar, I think, to most of us would be the lithium ion, because we all have a small version of it. And battery energy storage is very modular as well. There can be these large-scale ancillary services systems that Hansel mentioned at the hundreds of megawatts scale. There are also the same kind of technology that can be utilized from the off-grid perspective when we look at the hybrid systems that tie into solar and with diesel for microgrid systems. There are kinetic sources as well, flywheel technology. This one is, I think, a little less developed in terms of the technology because it is a slower charge-discharge as compared to the more chemical-based type of energy storage systems. And then, of course, there's, as mentioned earlier as well, there's pumped hydro storage that can also be utilized, but this would be very dependent on geographical location. So I think the application of energy storage systems is really dependent on the context and the need and what kind of charge-discharge do you need, how quickly do you need to be able to address. If it's something that has to be for load stabilization, it has to be able to discharge quickly. If it's a longer term, then there can be other types of technologies to be considered.
Thank you.
My other panelists might want to add.
Pretty much agree with Chini. So for every type of or technology of energy storage, there's an equivalent kind of appropriateness in terms of the applications that it will be used into. So for example, for high discharge rate, it's more appropriate for ancillary services because the energy is not as important. It's more important in terms of the megawatt capacity and not on the duration. But for example, for other applications such as capacity firming, where the duration is really critical, I think other technology or other chemistry of batteries would be more appropriate, such as sodium, sulfur, etc.
Thank you, Chini and Hansel. Yes, Alvin?
Yeah, they've pretty
Yeah.
much summarized everything, though. Yeah, I agree.
Okay. Now let's go to the policy and regulatory aspect affecting energy storage. From your experience, what are the current key policies and rules on energy storage that affect your businesses? We know that the Department of Energy has recently signed or issued the Department of Energy Circular 23-04-008, which prescribes the policy for energy storage in the electric power industry. And what do you think of possible future regulations that would affect ESS in the Philippines? Maybe I'll ask Alvin to comment first.
Thank you, Attorney. Yeah. So I appreciate the time to be here. So as BayWa, we are a foreign developer. So we are active in various markets in Europe, in US, in Asia Pacific, and now we're entering the Philippines. And we see in the Philippines we see quite a lot of potential, especially with the wide support from the government and from our fellow developers, our fellow stakeholders in the business, especially with the recent JAP and the government's push to increase our renewable capacity, like by 35% in 2040 and then so on 2050 in 2040. So yeah, we appreciate the DOE for being proactive in releasing these policies, especially what Attorney Quintero mentioned. I think our first comment there is when the policy allows the system operator to own ESS assets. But I think they put what they call it. They put a condition there that only the SO can only dispatch if there are no available ancillary services. What will you comment on that? other panelists.
Yeah. Going back on the first department circular regarding the framework for energy storage, it clearly says there that the system operator or the transmission network provider is not allowed to own and operate an energy storage system. But as we know, one of the first application that energy storage can provide to the grid is ancillary services. And we know that the one responsible for dispatching ancillary services is the system operator. I personally welcome that idea, allowing system operator to own or at least operate an energy storage for the purposes of ancillary services, but in the extreme cases wherein there's no provider or there's no proponent for new ancillary services capacity to the grid.
Yeah, Chini?
I think one of the other benefits of this new regulation that has come in is that it now also defines RE plus ESS as being applicable for the RE incentives. And in relation to what has just been discussed, it applies as well to priority dispatch. So in terms of the income tax holiday and some of the other tax incentives, I think that this would really be beneficial to the take-up of ESS projects going forward, though, of course, it remains to be seen also what the IRRs will look like.
Yeah, I think because in other countries, actually, there's a separation between the transmission and the generation, actually. So in other countries, like in Germany, the transmission operators cannot actually own ESS there. So that's where we were coming from. Actually, we made comments there when the DOE tried to secure comments from us. But I think it's a welcome addition to give that clause wherein the SO can only dispatch once there are no available ancillary services. But I think it has to be defined what will constitute no available ancillary services, right?
And then probably just a trivia. In fact, in Germany and other parts of Europe, the system operator or the transmission network provider are allowed to own and operate an energy storage for the purpose of grid utility support. It doesn't clearly say as if they are allowed if it's for ancillary services, but it clearly says there that they are allowed if the purpose of the battery or if the application of the battery is for grid utility support. And we have done some projects with the German transmission operator before in my previous capacity.
Yeah, I think maybe just to a quick addition to that, and coming from the perspective of the DU, is that I think the incentives for the protection of the grid, it's not that apparent for developers and end users. We can't expect a residential village to want to invest in ESS when the home application is not yet that economically viable. But it does continue to introduce some risks on our side, and we want to be able to ensure that we're able to protect our assets. So in that case, it does, I think, give some flexibility for the DU to come in and step in and to make the necessary investments for the stability and to ensure that the grid is operating as well as it possibly can.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Our next question is, again, addressed to all three of our panelists. What are the challenges that you have encountered or anticipate to encounter in ESS integration and proposed solutions? Maybe Hansel, you can start.
Yeah, I'll go first. Yeah, we pretty much welcome the new department circular by the Department of Energy. But I think it's still on a high level. So what I would like to see is more of a more concrete plan, more concrete rules for energy storage. And I want it to be application specific. Though it's mentioned in the department circular that, yes, energy storage can do this and that, right? Different application. But there's no specific rules per se pertaining to each of the application. For example, energy arbitrage, right? What's the specific rule for that? What are the regulations applicable to energy arbitrage? Solar plus battery. What should be the grid connection requirement for solar plus battery? We have the grid connection requirement for solar, right? But what if it's a combined solar and energy storage? What's the applicable grid connection requirement for that? Those things, I think, are still missing. Yes, we welcome the department circular allowing such application to be in the grid, but I would like to see those rules in place for us to see this growth of energy storage in the grid.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you. I agree it's a good first step, the DOE circular. But as Hansel said, there's still a lot of needs to be done in terms of the regulatory framework for ESS in the Philippines. Yes, Chini? Yeah.
Yeah, I agree as well. I think if you look at it, it's really very top level, and I think the only reference really to requirements from the technical perspective would be the bidirectional meter. So we also look forward to see what the IRRs look like and what in practice it's going to be once we roll it out and for the variety of different applications of ESS.
Alvin?
Okay, yeah. Hansel also mentioned energy arbitrage. Yeah, I agree that energy arbitrage has to be formulated properly because I believe that for ESS projects to be profitable, there has to be revenue stacking. I mean, you cannot build ESS only for ancillary services. I mean, to be profitable, you have to go energy arbitrage. And I think there was no clear guidelines on like charging from the grid and then discharging. I think I'm not sure because in other countries it has happened that their ESS was treated as both a producer and a consumer. So the ESS is charged when is taxed and charged when it charges from the grid, and then another tax and another fees when it discharges from the grid. I think it has to be needs to be clarified here.
I think, yeah, I agree with Alvin. And it goes back to the definition of the energy storage, right?
Yeah.
Here in the Philippines, I think they try to define it as a generator, a generation asset, right? But in other jurisdictions, such as Australia, in Americas, and in the Europe, they made a new classification for energy storage. Yes, it acts as a load sometimes. Yes, it provides energy sometimes, but it neither is a load nor a generator, right? So they made a different classification. They made it as a bidirectional resource. So there's now a three classification of facility in other jurisdiction: generator, load, and a bidirectional resource. And by allowing that definition, I think it allows more application. It allows developers to look into other applications applicable for energy storage.
I think it's also written in the circular where it says that the ESS is a temporary storage that can be dispatched at a later date. But I guess we need to clarify more on the taxes and the fees. But yeah.
Thank you, everyone. Again, I'd like to address this question to all three of our panelists. What is the current size or current installed capacity of the battery ESS market in the Philippines? And what trends do you see in terms of growth? Hansel, maybe?
Yeah, I'll take a crack first. So based on my experience working with a global energy storage provider before, we've deployed more than 500 megawatt of energy storage here in the Philippines with a developer. All of those are for ancillary services. And I've heard that other global energy storage provider did the same. So pretty much probably in the range of 600 to 800 megawatt. The duration could be around 1 to 2 hours. And in terms of the market size in the future, probably 3 or 5 years from now, we can look at the Bloomberg report saying that the market for energy storage in the Philippines could be around 3 to 5 gigawatts in the next 3 to 5 years.
Yes. It's pretty much along the same lines as what was already mentioned. And I think we had a panelist earlier from Climate Smart Ventures who also released a study in the past couple of years where they showed that in terms of even just committed capacity for this year and next year, we're already at 2 gigawatts. So certainly we're tracking on that same level for the 3 to 5 in the next coming years.
And we can see that the Philippines is actually more advanced in the ESS compared to its other peers in the region. I mean, like in other countries, in Europe and US, they overbuilt so our resources there, and there are even countries whose grids have crashed or has destabilized. They have applied ESS too late. It's good that as early as now, when we still don't have too much RE penetration, that the government and the developers are already thinking about promoting ESS, which is a natural facility to help stabilize the grid due to this incoming RE resources, especially with the current JHAP.
All right, thank you. Hansel, you mentioned earlier Australia. I understand that in Australia, their ESS sector has been growing rapidly, and their roadmap or plan is really for even for even the batteries to be manufactured there, because indeed they have the metals to build the batteries. So they are planning to have an entire ecosystem of battery energy storage, renewable energy and battery energy storage, all done within Australia.
Right. And the good thing about the Australian market is that, if I recall it correctly, they have, I think, more than 14 services right now under their market. They have the energy market, and they have a couple of market services for ancillary services. And that pretty much allowed energy storage to grow in Australia. And I think right now, even the market operator and the independent system operator of Australia have recognized the benefit of energy storage for grid utility support. From what I remember, they even invited some developers and technology partners to propose for energy storage, particularly to increase the short circuit ratio. So for electrical engineers here, you understand short circuit ratio pertains to the strength of the grid. So Australia market operator invited several technology providers, particularly energy storage providers, to install X megawatt amount of energy storage at certain areas in Australia where they're experiencing some instability. And that kind of gave me an idea where, if Australian market or the Australian market operator allows for such kind of a sandbox type of a mechanism, why not allow such kind here in the Philippines as well, right? We're pretty much advanced in terms of energy storage, at least in the Southeast Asia region. I think we're pretty much matured in terms of looking into other technologies, particularly for energy storage, wherein we could be the forefront.
Yeah, I agree. I think Australia could potentially be a good model for us, not just in RE, but also in terms of their plans to develop their minerals to manufacture batteries in Australia. We do have most of the metals that are needed to produce batteries here in the Philippines.
Right, and then to add, if I may just share, this Inflation Reduction Act, or IRA, in the US actually allows technology providers or energy storage providers to assemble or at least manufacture batteries in the US. And by doing that, they'll be able to have incentives on top of the incentives that they're getting right now. And that, I think, is a welcome idea for the integrators such as Fluence, Wärtsilä, Sungrow, to put up their manufacturing facility in the US and then have those equipment be provided to renewable energy companies. And I think that could be applicable in the Philippines as well.
Right. Alvin?
Yeah, I think in the Philippines we do have incentives under the CREATE law, but they're not near as on the level of the RE law, right? I mean, for standalone. But of course, if you have a plant that's RE and BESS, the BESS can ride on the incentives of that RE plant, right?
Okay. What would be the concerns and roles of local and foreign players in ESS in the Philippines? Maybe I'll ask Alvin first.
Okay. Okay. As we mentioned earlier, we're actually concerned with the bankability of ESS here. I mean, in other countries, we're looking at how stackable is for the revenues of the ESS. I mean, yes, there's AS, there's the market for AS, which is good, but how is the market for arbitrage? And in other countries, I'm not sure if you're familiar with this, they also implement capacity market where they pay off a certain amount per megawatt per year to project owners. It's similar to an auction program here, similar to JAP actually. I hope it's something that can be implemented here because it will be a really good policy to promote ESS here.
Yeah, Jean.
From my perspective, I think aside from what's already been mentioned, I think the value that can be brought by foreign players especially is to continue with the research and development side of the business, because we were talking about manufacturing and minerals earlier, and looking at the trending as well with EVs, which is also going to add to the demand for these raw materials. It's going to, I think we have a relatively short window of about a decade before we start to see the supply and demand get affected by this. So it is, I think, the biggest benefit that can be added by foreign players is to continue with R&D on other kinds of battery technologies, looking at non-mineral kind of solutions like sulfur, and I think sodium was also mentioned earlier. So we have to be able to expand the breadth of ESS types of technologies to be able to cope with future demand.
Yeah, I think we have a bit more time. Maybe we have time to discuss some of the developments in battery chemistries and which ones we see are being used in energy storage solutions, which ones potentially could be, with the kinds of metals that we have here, we could use or develop here in the Philippines.
Yeah, at least for the first few 100 megawatts of energy storage that I've seen here in the Philippines, those have NMC type of chemistry. Providers could be Samsung, SDI batteries. And probably 2 years before, LFP batteries are not so matured yet, but now we're seeing LFP batteries around. They promote safety features, they promote a more competitive price versus NMC batteries. And I've seen a growth in terms of LFP manufacturing facilities, at least in the APAC region, right? But probably would depend on the application, right? So NMC or lithium-ion batteries, NMC or LFP or lithium-ion phosphate, that could be best used for ancillary services, right? But for longer duration energy storage, if we're talking about 6 or 8 hours, probably not the most cost-effective solution. Lithium-ion is not. Probably we're going towards redox flow battery. So yeah, depends primarily on the application. But in terms of ancillary services, I've seen NMC and lithium iron phosphate type of chemistry.
Thank you.
Well, on our side, we have had a couple of forays into ESS. We have a couple of microgrids in Cagbalete, Isla Verde, and then we have our 2 megawatt BESS in San Rafael. We actually have a variety of chemistries on this, NMC and LFP, and we're in the process of also identifying, I think, you know, as Hansel mentioned, it really does depend on the application. We're in the process of also identifying which of these are best suited for our needs. So there's a wide variety, and I think, you know, if you've seen the previous conferences, now we're seeing more face-to-face. There are so many storage manufacturers and providers that have come out just in the past year. So the market is there, and yeah, we're keen to see which ones of these prove to be, when we use it in the actual application, which ones are the most robust, which ones are the most reliable.
Okay, thank you.
Currently use LFP, but we are also open to exploring the other battery chemistries and technologies.
Thank you. I think we have time for Q&A. So our panelists would be happy to receive questions from the floor. Yes, Jafet. Could you briefly introduce yourself, Jafet, and your affiliation? Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Jafet Karaoke. I'm an independent consultant and also with the Wild Energy Council. Very interesting discussion, and especially I had a lot of mention about metals and minerals that would be very suitable for the energy storage. Just a question, because one thing that I noted, and I think this is a good time perhaps for people in the industry to be thinking about, is that, as Ruth mentioned, that a lot has been done over the last 4 months in the energy industry than the last 6 years. It kind of looks like there is a lot of progressive thought, might be from the people in the palace, or might be the people around the president. And perhaps based on that, there might be a need to rethink whether they should also think about extending the liberalization towards companies that are focused on metals and mining in the ESS stage, because then that would definitely unlock that potential, because there's no need for us to talk about a lot of storage and then there's a cap on who can mine these metals and mining. So I don't know whether there's that discussion, whether people have thought about it, or whether there's anything around that.
Maybe I think it's more of a legal question, so I'll take a crack at it. So actually, mineral processing is not it's a liberalized industry. So if you want to set up a mineral processing company, it can be up to 100% foreign owned. Now mining, there are basically two types of mining arrangements here with the government. One is called the Mineral Production Sharing Agreement, which is subject to minimum 60% Filipino ownership, and the other is the Financial or Technical Assistance Agreement, which can be up to 100% foreign owned. So most of our large copper projects, so as we know, copper is also needed in electrification. There are a number that are already covered by financial or technical assistance agreements that, as I mentioned, can be wholly foreign owned. In terms of our nickel, cobalt, manganese deposits, these are mostly covered by mineral production sharing agreements. So there is at least 60% Filipino ownership in the mining of these metals. But the good thing in the Philippines is mining minerals like nickel is not so cost intensive because the deposits are quite shallow. So there are a lot of Philippine nickel mining companies that are able to do it even without foreign capital. I think it's in the mineral processing that we need the foreign expertise and capital. And I am aware that a number of foreign companies are already looking at the Philippines. They would also, of course, have to partner with the Philippine mining companies that are into nickel mining. So that's basically what happened in Indonesia. Local mining companies partnering with Chinese smelters, even OEM manufacturers like the likes of Ford, and I heard Tesla is also in discussions now with Indonesian partners. Yes, ma'am.
Let me just react to that first. The next general membership meeting of MAP will have, that is the June one. I was looking for the date, but you may contact the Management Association of the Philippines. We'll have the Secretary of the DNR as our guest speaker, and that will be the main topic on minerals and other things that are contemporary issues. My comment is applicable not only to this, but the previous session. We have suggestions, and we have two things to act on this. No? Some of us are leaders in different organizations, like I must correct what I said, that our Ruth here is the chair of the MAP Energy Committee. So we can pass this through that, but there is the time gap between now and when the next meeting of that committee will be. And there will be, other suggestions that may not be taken on by the committee. what we can do is really to have every convention and committee like conference like this to have a list of resolutions that we can submit to the appropriate agencies. Like our Business for Sustainable Development that used to be the Philippine Business for the Environment, will be happy to listen to you and endorse this to the appropriate cabinet members. And we have very good cabinet members, including Secretary Popolotilla. So I suggest that we do that, especially on the point that I mentioned, which is I think very important, even for energy storage, the R&D. We really have to allocate. If we want to be a global leader in the resources that we have, ample supply of solar, wind, water, we have to spend the things on R&D. We cannot just get technologies from everywhere, no? And my last comment is that when they also come up with policies like allocating so much percent for renewables versus the conventional, we have to ask the question, what is the basis of these policies? It's not clear to me until now. What makes us think that we should only have 2% or something like that for solar, no? I think we have to raise this issue because there is one basic criterion that must be considered. One is what resources do we have, right? We have three forms of capital. We have products, services which include technologies. Do we have technologies for these energy technologies that we are promoting? Number two is the natural capital. Do we have natural resources? Number three is the human capital. Do we have trained people? And can we easily train them? So those three. And for nuclear power, I tell you, there is nothing going on for us. Now, for renewables, we don't have all of them. For example, for for solar that was mentioned earlier, we need a lot of land. And we are a country with 4/5 water and only 1/5 land. So we really cannot afford. But then that is one of the major research topics. The type of cell that we use, the type of panel. So we have the type of resources that we need. All of those, they require allocation of budget by the government, okay?
Thank you so much, ma'am, for your suggestions. May I ask our panelists for any reaction?
Yeah, particularly for energy storage, I was able to draft a report and send it to Department of Energy a few years back. I think that was 2018 or 19. Just, I think, during the time that we're starting to see energy storage. And one of the suggestions I made to the department was to include energy storage or to allow energy storage to enjoy the benefits under the RE law, which they did just recently. And there are some other recommendations that I did before to DOE. Well, probably I just have to follow it up given the new administration, right? But yeah, we've done some recommendations already to the department. Even the definition of energy storage, we did some suggestion regarding that. But then, yeah, we just really have to follow up.
Yeah, yes.
Yeah. It is really good. I mean, based on our experience, it is really good that DOE and other government agencies, they do really listen to developers, to us. Yeah, as long as we follow up and we comment every day. Yeah.
Yes. Well, just I think to tie it up from the previous panel to this one, we won't be able to see this proliferation of RE without energy storage going with it hand in hand. So the development and comments that come into RE necessarily have to be tied in to ESS as well. So our two groups or interests necessarily have to work together to move things forward.
Yeah, and if I may say, we've seen renewable energy plan, right? But there should be a plan for energy storage as well, knowing that energy storage is a key enabler of RE integration. That we have yet to see.
Yeah, and yeah, we agree. I mean, we are predicting because of the JAP that a lot of RE, variable RE is coming to the grid, which can destabilize the grid, and ESS is just the natural addition to stabilize that. We've seen other countries that those grids have destabilized. I mean, there is one within Asia Pacific that has discontinued RE just because of that. Because this country has most of this RE on the northern side, I guess, and most of the load on the southern side. So ESS could have solved that problem. But yeah, thank you.
Thank you. I think we have out of time. So let us all please thank again our panelists, Chini, Hansel, and Alvin.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.